So let's do some selections for Super Saturday, round 5 of the Six Nations 2022, where we've got two sides fighting out for the championship with France and Ireland there. And also England, Scotland and Wales could all move around between 3rd to 5th, so plenty to play for sure. So France versus England. I've gone through all the permutations, look at a previous video for that, but if France win, they win the Grand Slam, and they win, of course, they get bonus points just to make sure they do as well for a Grand Slam. So France need to win this. England, if they win, then Ireland are right in it. Anyway, key targets for this English team is they need line breaks. They've had good possession, their forwards have made good ground, but they're not cutting through in the backs especially. So this is the team that I would pick. Let's go through it, and I'd love to know what you guys think of it. Ellis Genge at loosehead had a great game versus Ireland. Absolutely. Now, was he as dominant in the scrum as it looked with the penalties? Well, probably not. Some of those penalties were a little bit, arguable, but still, he played very well in the scrum and in the loose. One of his best games for England, for sure. Jamie George, very solid indeed. Looks highly motivated, really into this, which is great to see. A bit of a second win for him after briefly being dropped from the squad. Sinclair, maybe a bit of a problem. He had an HIA, maybe he's not available. If he is available, I still think he starts. I think he probably is the best option at the moment. I would bring Williams onto the bench there just to change it up. I think he needs another go. A real big man there at tight head. We need more options at tight head. In the second row, Atoje and Laws, because of the early red card to Yules, they went together against Ireland and went beautifully, to be honest. Atoje was right on it, looking in top form. Now, could you play Launchbury there? Absolutely, but I think I'll stick with those two. Have Launchbury on the bench. Does Laws like being a second row? Well, does anyone like being a second row when there's an option of being in the back row? Probably not. That's the reality of it, to be honest. But he is a very effective second row, and I'm sure he'll give his all if he's selected there. Now, the back row's a little bit tricky with Curry being out now. We see Jack Willis being brought into the squad. Watched him play a few times. Great to see him back. Doesn't look quite as sharp or as match fit as he was, and that's completely understandable because when he did get that injury for the second time, of course, he was on fire at the time, so it's going to take him a while to get back there. Now, I know I've got two specialist number 8s in this back row, but I think Dombrant and Simmons both deserve to start, and they're both playing really well. I think that's absolutely fine. You can switch around who's 6 and 8 depending on the situation. I do think we need a specialist 7, so I'd pick Underhill there. If he's fit, I think he's good to go. So I think that would be good as long as he's match fit. I think it's a very good pack. I think it's very big, it's very dynamic. The pack is actually playing pretty well. At halfback, I'm going to stick with Randall and Smith. They need time together. I mean, Randall, maybe it wasn't quite his game because they were down to 14 men and we had to kick a bit more. But I think starting with 15 players, he absolutely is the guy. And he looks like he's really growing into the role. Smith's playing pretty well. A lot is expected of him, so I don't think we need to set our expectations too high. Maybe he needs to jink a bit less and just sometimes give the easy pass or kick and take the focus off him, so when he does jink and break, it's a bit more of a surprise. But, these are little things he'll probably have to learn, the differences between club rugby and international rugby. Sometimes less is more. Now, the centres. I am sticking with Slade and Marchant. I know it's not massively balanced. Slade isn't a natural 12, but they're both playing well. And Marchant, probably the best game he's had for England in the 13 shirt. I will have Kelly on the bench, though, even though I know he's not in the official squad. I still think he needs to be brought into this team to give more 12 options. In the back three, well, we need some pace in this back three. Noel's a great high work rate winger. Stewart's got his qualities, but outright speed isn't them. So we need a quick, big winger. Hassel-Collins, in form, fit, good to go. Let's get him in there. I don't know if Cokanasiga is ready yet as such anyway. You could go Radwan, but he needs some size there. So I think absolutely Hassel-Collins makes all sorts of sense to get in there. I'm sure Eddie Jones won't pick him because, well, he doesn't like big, quick wingers for some reason. Anyway, he'd probably go Malins, who is a good player but just doesn't carry the edge. So that's how I'd have it. And Malins on the bench, who can cover 10 and the back three. Kelly there is 12. A few other changes on the bench. Barbary, I definitely have Barbary on the bench. If you don't pick him now, then, what's the point? You might as well. He's ready to go. Impact off the bench. And if Quirk's not available, I don't see any point having Youngs coming on for impact. So I'd have Van Portfleet in there for sure, even though him and Kelly aren't in the squads. That's how I'd have it. So let me know what you think of that team. Now, France against Wales weren't at their best. I'm not sure you'd make many personnel changes, though. I think they just needed to play a bit better. There were, question marks over illness or whatever, but doesn't matter. I think just a few tweaks here and there. The pack unchanged, although I do feel they are missing Olivon a bit, having watched this Six Nations now. I'm not sure Cross is quite the player he is, or even Cretan coming on. But certainly the front row is going great. Bai and Marchand in top form. In fact, both hookers in top form. Malvaca as well. So that's all good. Aldreet maybe got outshined by Falatau against Wales, but he's still a top player. Dupont and Intermac, 9 and 10 of course. Although Intermac looked fairly restricted in the way he had to play against Wales, he looks much better when he's a bit more natural running the ball. In the centres, Dante and Fiku, I think absolutely. Villiers, a really good winger / flanker type player, a bit like Noel, but maybe a bit quicker to be honest. Moafana, strong runner there. I would change the fullback though as my one change. Jaminet does make a lot of errors. He does lots of great stuff as well. I know there was a comment saying, look, he's 22, maybe go a bit harsh on him, but this is international rugby and he did make some shockers. So I think it's fair to get Ramos in there. Jaminet on the bench, who can play 10 as well, as can Ramos. So I think that's absolutely fine, changing them around. Then the rest of the bench, as you see. The other change is I haven't been too impressed with Luku, to be honest. I know he's not as quick as Dupont, but he's meant to be a real calm head, very tactical. But when he came on for Wales, it didn't work, and the tactics didn't improve. Some dodgy kicks, etc. So I'd have the quicker Saran in from Toulon. So that's how I'd have France. Now, Ireland versus Scotland. Ireland, of course, have to win to give themselves a shot of winning the Six Nations. Ireland against England, they got a bit rattled, they lost a bit of shape, but they still scored 4 tries, so, not too bad there. They do have a few injury problems, though. In the front row, I would change it up a bit with Herring coming in for Sheehan. Sheehan struggled a little bit. He's still a youngster, and Herring's a quality player, so I think it's worth bringing him in, just shoring up that front row in the set piece potentially. Furlong, how much did he struggle versus Genge? How much was referee's interpretation? I've had comments on both sides, but I think he's still certainly good enough to start. In the second row, I think it has to be Byrne and Henderson, mainly because Ryan I don't think is going to be available. Baird has pulled out with a bad back. So still quality players, but not the selection they'd want. So I think Treadwell for me would come in onto the bench to cover second row. I'd change up the back row against England. Omani came in. I don't really see what he added, to be honest. So I think their best back row is Doris van der Fleer, Conan. Conan came out with a nice try maybe to show that as well. Doris a classy player as well. So I think that is the best back row. Half-backs, Gibson, Park and Sexton, I think is easy at the moment, although I am changing up the 9 replacement. Murray coming on just doesn't have that impact, to be honest, if he's not a starter. So I think Casey's more likely to have an impact and be a similar sort of player to Gibson Park. Centres, a little tweak again. I'm dropping Ringrose. Now, Ringrose hasn't done anything particularly bad, but has he been on fire? No, and I think Henshaw needs some game time, and Aki's power is very useful. We saw that against England, giving the midfield of England a hard time. So I think Aki and Henshaw is worth a roll. Bit harsh on Ringrose, but he's on the bench, so I think that's fine. He doesn't have to start. He hasn't got a right to start as such. The back 3 stay the same. Lowe really makes things happen. Conway's skills were very useful against England, and Keenan, a classy goalkeeper type player at the back for sure. Then the bench, as you see, another change I would have is Coombs coming into the back row, just because I want to see him. We've seen a lot of Omani. We need to see Coombs if he's going to start starring into the World Cup. So let me know what you think of that Irish team. Now for Scotland, this game will be the defining game, of course. Against Ireland, away from home, it's a real tough one. This is the team I've put out. Schoeman was really good, I thought, against Italy. Did some nice stuff around the park. Turner was one of the best players for sure, just looked absolute class, and maybe he's cemented his number 1 status with that performance. That was impressive. In the second row, I'd give Hodgson a start. I think he might as well. I mean, you can't win the Six Nations, so you might as well try a few things, and I don't think Skinner has been world class. I think Hodgson and Gilchrist with Skinner dropping to the bench is a good way to go. Back row, Darge and Watson both played well against Italy. It's not the best balance, to be honest. When Richie's back, I think he plays 6 and Darge and Watson fight for 7. Matt Fagerson is their best number 8, so I'm pretty sure about that. So he starts at 8 for me. Price and Russell, I mean, Price has had a really good tournament actually, made some really sharp breaks. Russell does a few odd things, another crazy moment versus Italy they actually got away with. In the centres, please select Hutchinson. Every time I see him play for Northampton, he makes things happen as a first receiver, the playmaker, a line breaker. Love him. I'm not convinced Johnson is a world-class 12. He's a good 12. But play Hutchinson. See what he can do alongside Harris. On the bench, Tuipulotu, I think, is a really good utility sub to come on. So I think that's the best balance for me. In the back 3, we still haven't got Van der Merwe, who's banned, of course. So Stain stays, who was decent enough against Italy. The informed Graham and Hogg, who is so dangerous on the counter-attack. And the bench, as you see, staying pretty similar, but with Skinner dropping down and Tuipulotu there as well. So let me know what you think of that Scottish team. Now, the Welsh team versus Italy. This is all about a bonus point. If they lessen a few tries, I don't think that matters. They might as well set up to attack. So this is the team I've gone for. Change in the front row. Well, Wyn Jones I'd have coming back, who I think is a slightly better player than Thomas. Lake, if not now, when, get him in there, and he's a bit more attacking, give him a full game. I think that would be really exciting to see, or at least a start. Rowlands and Beard, I think they stay. Seb Davis played really well at 6, I thought, but I still have Moriarty in. He's a bit more dangerous in attack, but you could play Seb Davis there as well. Basham, very explosive in attack, needs to improve in other areas around the park, but if you're going to score tries, I think he's the best option at 7. And then the classy Faletau, who's just come back from injury and getting better and better, in at 8. Thomas Williams and Bigger, 9-10. Bigger miles better than anyone else they've got. They've got to keep him fit, and it's really scary when he has to go back and play for Northampton, but he's a tough guy. He always seems to come through. If Tompkins is available, then I'd have him at 12 and Watkin at 13. You need, I think, that footwork of Tompkins, a little bit more edge in the centres. Keep the back 3 as they are. Cuthbert especially playing very well, and I'd keep Rees-Zammit on the bench, but give him maybe a bit more time, especially against Italy, maybe 20-25 minutes to try and cause some damage. And Seb Davis dropping to the bench. Navidi, I think, makes sense over Morgan because he covers 6, 7 and 8. Then Hardy and Anscombe and Rees-Zammit. So let me know what you think, guys, of all those teams, who you would select, and I'll catch you next time.